Everybody wear a mask. Wait, no, not like that. What are you doing? Oh, God! This is Americanitis, episode 23 for June 6th, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Sagner. This podcast contains harsh language and covers adult topics. You'll be challenged by views with which you do not agree. We may not be politically correct, but we are correct about politics. Whatever happened to those murder hornets? Can somebody check on them, please? The dominating news story is obviously the rioting and looting that's taking place across our country, and in the middle of a pandemic, no less. Volumes will be written about this point in American history, but I try to keep things about 20 minutes. Let's see how we can do. Let me ask, have you heard people admonishing the protesters that they need to stay 6 feet apart, that they're killing grandma by going outside? Are they being loaded into paddy wagons and shipped off to jail for not wearing masks? You know, given the same treatment as those who had the audacity to walk their dogs in public or swim at the beach. Well, that would be an overreaction, you say. Well, I happen to agree with you, but let's maybe take a look at how some other protesters were treated, shall we? Those who protested the lockdown were called racists, suicidal, homicidal, reckless, worrisome, selfish. It was said that they don't care about the lives of others and that they were twisting the very idea of liberty. It was even suggested that they should forego medical care. Rather, it was said that if you protest the lockdown, you ought to be denied medical care in the case that you got the virus. This from the same people who claim that medical care is a human right. This is what the demonstrators against the immoral and useless lockdowns were called. They were denounced for wanting to work, wanting to open their places of business, and wanting to feed their children. Now, faced with massive demonstrations in the streets, with thousands packed together all yelling and talking with each other maskless, a group of 1,288 public health professionals, infectious disease professionals, and community stakeholders, whatever the hell that means, have signed an open letter that essentially says it's okay to go out and protest even though we said it will kill people, because the cause is one with which we agree. Here's the real money shot. I can't believe this many people said the bad part out loud. Quote, "This should not be confused with a permissive stance on all gatherings, particularly protests against stay-at-home orders. Those actions not only oppose public health interventions, but are also rooted in white nationalism and run contrary to respect for black lives." Unquote. Links in the show notes. So, if I think it's bullshit that the state tells me I can't go to a baseball game or gather in groups of more than 10 or travel more than 5 miles from my home or cut people's hair, that makes me a racist. Does anyone else feel like that term has lost all meaning? And my favorite part is, those actions oppose public health interventions. Where? You're not listening to us, boo-hoo. You have no right to tell me what I can and cannot do, and you never did. Get the fuck out of here. Ideology trumps all, it seems. If you like what I'm saying, then I can march. But if not, I have to stay home. Well, I don't want to hear a single fucking word more about how I'm killing grandma and I should wear a mask, and that states that open too early are doomed to have an outbreak, and how I should stay 6 feet away from people, or literally anything else that these buffoons spew out of their cock holsters. I'm done. All confidence has been lost. And this is not just a farcical epidemiological ceremony either. The state is, in essence, taking a side on ideological grounds. And that should be extremely alarming to you. If you open your nail salon, we'll throw you in jail. But we like his particular brand of protest, so we'll let it slide. Selective use of force based on ideals is a very, very dangerous prospect. It's one thing when I tell you that your idea is a good one, or that it's horse shit. I'm a guy on the internet. You can tell me to get bent. This goes from everyone from a beggar to Jeff Bezos. What makes it different is, as always, force. The government has a monopoly on the use of force. When it decides to take a position on morality or ideology, that force comes with it implicitly. If that doesn't scare the ever-loving shit out of you, may I suggest you pick up a book that wasn't written by Dr. Seuss. Despite my protestation, we did go through a lockdown. I use past tense here because judging by the traffic I hit on the freeway this morning, Americans see through the charade as well as I can, and they're done being hermits. But it did happen, and A is A. So now we have consequences. We have deaths from suicide, drug abuse relapses, and a lack of medical care, so much wealth destruction, millions unemployed, and so much precious time lost from your life. And for what? Did this save lives or damn them? We'll never know, as there's never going to be a counterfactual, and there's no path to accountability or punishment even if we could pin the blame on some evildoer. It's almost as if during times of uncertainty we should look to principles to guide us. Principles built on reason and based on human nature. Those principles would have told us that ordering innocent, well people to stay in their homes upon pain of fine or imprisonment, forcibly closing places of business, and enforcing the wearing of useless masks is a violation of our rights as human beings. Actions have consequences, and we're seeing some of them now. I generally try to stay in my lane of ethics and politics. I'm a what if the world were better kind of a guy. As I've said before, I'm not a scientist. I'm a meta-scientist. I'm also not a psychologist, but I am a being with a psychology and a family, and I can tell you that this much time being restricted is not healthy for a mind. I posit that a contributing factor to this rash of protests spreading not only to other cities but across the globe is the fact that people have been confined to quarters. It strikes me as natural, as the father of 2 boys, that when cooped up, people feel the need to run around and get a little wild. Otherwise, people would love prison. Listen, I called for a revolution 2 weeks ago, and it was suggested to me that I may have received my wish, but this monkey's paw had a trick in store for me. Sure, there was unrest and anger and indignation, but there was also senseless murders and looting and arson and a complete lack of focus. Do you remember the guy's name, the one who died? Yesterday I called him George Flynn, and somebody had to look it up and correct me. His story started this mess, but it was so quickly overshadowed by the barbarians burning Rome that his name escaped me. If that's not tragic, I don't know what is. It's George Floyd, by the way. Most people are claiming Antifa is the group stirring up shit. Some say it's right-wing agitators. Some say white supremacists, so that's a stretch. I don't care, though. What I've gathered from the evidence available to me from on-the-scene video is that peaceful protesters are having their voices crowded out by thugs, burglars, and arsonists. It's interesting to think about whence they came, but that's not my point in this podcast. I aim to show how all of these signs of social unrest are tied together. Police brutality is a complicated subject. But there is one aspect that is shared with all of our other topics. A disintegrated philosophy means disintegrated law. Laws ought to protect your individual rights, but when often well-meaning morons grab hold of power, they think they can pull the levers and adjust the dials to make a better society. Let's take one such example, drug laws. What right of mine does it protect when you stop me from using cocaine, or stop my neighbor from lighting up a joint? If you're a dumbass, you might say that drug use increases crime rates, but if that's your argument, I will point you to the fact that drugs have won the war on drugs, and that violent cartels are built on the back of illicit trade. Now, we have an irrational law that does nothing to protect my rights, and in fact violates them. So what? They wanted a better society, so they pulled the lever. Well, now we have the police, who are sworn to protect and serve, marching the streets and breaking into people's homes to find some weed or some heroin in a baggie. Now a family doesn't have a father or a brother. The man is in jail, and a community is ravaged because someone in power doesn't like how such and such chemical affects your brain. Do you think that this will endear the public to the police, or vice versa? Or do you think that for generations now people have had a gut feeling that this isn't right? They just know that they miss their brother, their father, their daughter. This sows unrest and unease. The officers know it too. On some level, they know that what they're doing doesn't make sense. It's not a terrorist they're bringing into the station. It's John Q. Taxpayer who's growing a weed plant in his garden. What does that do to your self-esteem? I can't even imagine. I know that the job of law enforcement is hard for other reasons, but this one would kill me. I could not wake up in the morning and put on a uniform knowing that I was probably going to have to arrest someone for a dime bag, that I was going to have to demolish a family because some asshole in a suit decided the public can't be trusted to make their own decisions. Now the idea is being floated that we should defund the police. On an emotional level, I can almost see my way there. I'm sympathetic. They take our money by force, and they lock us in our homes, and then fail to protect our property from rioters. Seems like a bad fucking deal. But let's peel back the layers. Let's take this argument one step backward. Let's accept for the moment that the police are an essential part of living in a society. They enforce the laws and keep us safe. There are bad cops in this city, so let's do this. Let's fire every single one of them, top to bottom, and individually select the best officers by whatever metric you wish to set. Fill in the ranks, and what will you get? You'll get exactly the same shit you're getting now. Why? Because the police are led by the laws. The laws are written by the people we put into office. The police are doing what we told them to do. They are protecting and serving us. That is the nature of law enforcement. Don't like what the cops are doing? You need to look a few layers up before you can find the root. Everything is integrated and all these problems have a shared cause. The lockdowns are allowed to happen, police brutality happens, and the riots are taking place because of public schools. John Dewey set this country back 100 years, and I will never forgive him. He is one of the most evil people in my book, right next to Immanuel Kant. If what our government education serves up were a food, you wouldn't deem it fit for prisoners. That's what we're feeding into our children's minds. They're not taught to think, but to feel. What is truth? Let's take a poll and see what everyone thinks. We're raising generation after generation of mindless animals. They follow the herd, all reacting to each other, fearful to touch the world. You see, people look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them that all of history is driven by philosophy. Even the events that are unfolding today, this is mostly because of that crime of all crimes, the mind-body dichotomy. Sure, says the average man. The philosophers can sit around, pondering their navels and spinning yarns about a priori this and noumenal that, but what does that have to do with me? I have to go out, live in the real world. I have to do things. I don't have time to wonder about free will versus determinism and reason versus mysticism, and you know what? I don't blame a single person who feels this way. Unless you have a penchant for this kind of work, philosophy has been filled with so much bullshit that it will drive most away. But there is no mind-body dichotomy, and not paying attention to philosophy does not diminish its power. Philosophy is about how we see the world and how we act in it. Whether you know your philosophy or not, you have one, and it guides your actions to the best of its ability. When you put little to no work into it, then you have some mongrel conglomeration rattling around up there, filled with half-heard bromides and your parents' edicts that you need to wash your armpits and that sharing is caring. That will allow you to fumble pragmatically ahead, grasping at phantoms, but it will not provide you with principles. And what I just described is the direction of the deterioration of the American way. Just as when you ignore the maintenance on your car or on your body, they break down, so the philosophical foundation of our nation is eroding. Even people who can recite the Bill of Rights by heart can't tell you why you have those rights. And this, my friend, is how it's all tied together. When you and your fellows don't know up from down or right from wrong, you can't defend your rights. You can't identify a bad law. You just have your gut to rely on. It won't make sense to you when I say that we shouldn't have curfews because of protests, but protests because of curfews. This flimsy understanding of America and her founding principles does not a stable republic make. It has become popular to look at America's history and seek only examples of racism, bigotry, and exploitation. This can be found in our history. Of that there is no doubt. This nation was founded on individual rights, but that standard was not applied equally to all citizens. But contradictions cannot be abided. Just as an apple cannot be all red and all green at the same time, so a man cannot have rights and be a slave at the same time. Therefore, brother fought brother until that contradiction was resolved. Now we stand as free men, but can be locked in our home by the stroke of a pen. We can pursue our happiness, but have to ask permission before setting up a business. We fight on one hand for the bodily autonomy of women, but we restrict what people can put in their bodies. We are living in contradiction. The strain is becoming intense, and something has snapped. It is my sincere hope that some of what my fellows have been saying gets through, and that this is a turning point that makes us realize that freedom is the answer, and not slavery. Somehow I don't see that happening. When we're surrounded by the embers of a once great civilization, saying "I told you so" is going to taste like ash and blood in my mouth. Let's not let that happen. How? Lift your voice and let reason reign. Let people know what you heard here. Unreason is eating us up from the inside. We don't need a return to normalcy. We need a return to Aristotle. This week I'd like to highlight a video that was brought to my attention by Mr. Kirk Wilcox, link in the show notes. One of the most disgusting things I've seen during this entire debacle is people taking a knee or chanting some pledge to try to make up for their original sin of racism. It's as if they feel so guilty about the actions of people that they've never met that they feel compelled to prostrate themselves. It gives me the greatest sense of unease, of revulsion. I am a man of self-made soul. I will not apologize for actions that are not mine. I will never accept unearned guilt. The correct way to show solidarity was demonstrated in this video by a sheriff in Flint, Michigan. He did not take a knee. He did not ask for forgiveness for sins he did not commit. He took off his helmet, listened to the group of protesters, agreed with some of their points, and then walked with them. It reminded me of the following quote: "When my brothers try to draw a circle to exclude me, I shall draw a larger circle to include them. Where they speak out for the privileges of a puny group, I shall shout for the rights of all mankind." Got a topic or feedback? The podcast is at Americanitis Tech. You can also follow me at Dan Sagner. My last name is spelled Sierra Alpha Golf November Echo Romeo. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. If podcasts are your thing, I'm also on YouTube, so remember to annihilate that subscribe button. Patronize us at patreon.com/techside. Show notes are at techside.net/Americanitis. Theme music by Eddie. I thank you all for listening. Later days.